There's a poem written in the 19th century by an Englishman named Robert Browning. I'm not the best at poetry, either writing it or understanding it. The only poem I can ever really remember is Roses are red, violets are blue. I learned this in the 8th grade, I think. Roses are red, violets are blue. I've got a bulldog that looks like you. Well, that's not a very nice thing necessarily, but it's pretty neat when you're 13 years old. But this fellow, Robert Browning, was a fellow that had kind of a dark humor and commented on things of society. All went through my mind, boy, be at home today with all that we see on television, reading here. But nonetheless, he had a very famous poem in his world called Rabbi Ben Ezra. And there's a line in there that many folks are familiar with, even if they don't know who wrote it or where it came from. And that line says, "The best is yet to be, the last of life for which the first was made." And he goes on and concludes that by saying, "Our time is in God's hand." That's what Chaz got on the sign out front. You may have seen that. Our times are in his hands. Some time ago here at church, we distributed some devotional material. It's called My Utmost for His Highest. It's by a fellow named Oswald Chambers, who's a very deep thinker. And it's good stuff. You can't just skim over and read it. You have to read it and think about it. We distributed those. I hope you still have your copy and are using it from time to time. But this fellow, Oswald Chambers, was the principal of a school in London called the Bible Training College. And he was principal from 1911 to 1915. He later on became a chaplain in World War II and died at a very young age. But he used to say that the initials of that school, Bible Training College, BTC, stood for something else. It stood for better to come. Because in his mind, his thinking, his saying was that the future for you and me is always bright because of our possibilities with Christ. Well, I'm wondering, as we look around at the world today, if you think about this, can you and I say that? Or can we believe it? That there's something better to come. That the best is yet to come. Now, you've heard me say this often, and you don't need me to tell you this, that these are hard, difficult times in which we live. Oh, we're still alive, and we're still able to do some things, and I hadn't run out of meeting weenies at home, and all that kind of stuff, and so life is going on, but is it still the best is yet to come? Life as you and I used to know it is gone. It's different. It is obviously not the same. Society has changed so much. Many folks have lost their jobs. Many businesses have shut down. Restaurants, stores, all those kind of things have gone the way of the American buffalo. There are very, very few of them left anymore. And I still would like for someone to explain to me, and if you can, I'm all ears, why is it that Walmart and Target and the big box stores and all can stay open, the little bitty mom and pop places that are the lifeblood, the backbone, the very essence of our society are forced to close. And I'm starting to believe some of the things we're reading here, that the reason the big ones stay open is because they make sizable contributions to folks of both political parties. Life, though, is different. The shutdowns, the work, things are different. Folks have lost their jobs. Many of them are not coming back. Look at our school system. Basketball is being played, but it's being played in front of maybe 25 fans. Sometimes even parents can't come. You may watch a ball game on television. It looks strange. It's kind of losing its allure. We were so used to entertainment, and things are so much different in that way. And not just those places, but so many other places. And, we start wondering and saying to each other, will these things come back? Some time ago, the late Merle Haggard, if you were into country music, had a song called "Are the Good Times Really Over for Good?" And in it he wondered, set to a tune, are the good times gone? Is the best of life over? Why doesn't the Ford and the Chevy last 10 years like it used to and like it should? Well, I can't answer that question. I can't say to you that the good times are over for good. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. I don't know. No one knows. And you and I find that many times when we talk about what's going on in life today, we may discuss it from one extreme to the other or somewhere in the middle. And then we invariably wind up saying, but I don't know. I don't know. Well, no wonder there's confusion among us average folk. Call it what you want. Too much information, misinformation, fake news, or something else. We just don't understand. Not so terribly long ago, within the last couple of weeks, Dr. Fauci, the fellow that so many folks look to for information about the virus and the pandemic, says to you and me and the whole world, it's going to get worse before it gets better. But it wasn't too many days ago when he said, I believe it's leveling off. Now, which is it? Is it worse or is it better? So there's no wonder there's this fellow with all these degrees and more degrees than a thermometer and years of experience dealing with illness and viruses and things, and he's giving out two different opinions. No wonder morons like me can't understand. Is it any wonder then that with that kind of stuff going on that the world and its country is becoming more and more depressed, more and more concerned, more and more upset? Folks are not only depressed anyway, but there is much more clinical depression leading to many more suicides, to much more substance and opioid abuse, and that is where so many folks are living these days. And then on top of the health concern and all those issues of the economy as well as health, we've got the rancor and the hatred and the animosity and just the plain meanness of folks in our government. From the White House to the State House to the courthouse. When you see those things that people say and do, when you hear folks on one side of the aisle say we've got to come together in unity, and what they're doing seems more like revenge, and then across the aisle are folks who want to turn the clock back to a time that will never come back, and in many ways should not have been, but was. So can you, can I, can any of us say the best is yet to be? Well, for the Christian, there is a perspective that we apply to heaven that says, well, yeah, that's better. And it will be when that time comes and we are not a part of this world, when we have crossed the great divide, when we are walking the streets of gold and we're playing on our harp and we're serving God and we're worshiping around the throne, better. The Bible says there will be no more tears, no more sorrow, no more heartache, no more pain, no more agony, no more death. But here's the bottom line to that, my friends. We're not there right now. Now, truthfully, and that'll happen sooner or later. When you're 18 or 21 or 35 or 45, you don't think it's far off. When you have a few more candles on your cake than that, you begin to realize, yeah, it is. But what do we do? How do we say it's better? How can we look for the best is yet to come until we get to that point, while we are still here, while we are living and working in this world and doing those things? How can we handle that? What can we do? Is there better to come in this world? Here's the answer to that question. If our hope is centered on Christ, the answer is a resounding yes. In the book of Romans, in chapter 8, verse 18, there's a verse that says this: I consider that our present sufferings are not worth comparing with the glory that will be revealed in us. Present sufferings. Do you have any? What are your present sufferings? We can't go out to eat with our buddies like we once did. We go places and we wear a mask. And can you imagine? It's been, I think, last weekend was a year to the time the first virus case was reported in this country. Now, folks were telling us that there was something going on in November and December, but it was in January of 2020 that word first appeared in print. And someone said, well, here's this virus. It's got, looks like a little ball and got crowns sticking all out of it. And here it is. What kind of sufferings have you had since then? Many folks have become ill. Too many folks have died for whatever reason. Businesses, I've said, have shut down. The economy that was going wide open. And I know not everybody was participating in that, but things were better overall, whatever that means. But now it's still going pretty strong, but more and more folks are out of work. Folks are losing jobs. What kind of present sufferings do you and I have? Jesus at another time in the New Testament is recorded that he said this, that in this world you will have trouble. He didn't say, could be one day y'all just kind of tooling along, everything's A-okay, copacetic, and all of a sudden something bad's going to happen. It could be. Now, I'm not saying it will, but it could be. No, he said exactly the opposite. He said, in this world, you will have trouble. You will have these present sufferings. that Paul wrote about. So the question is not if, but when. There are different kinds of sufferings and troubles these days, are there not? There's illness, there is death, there is loss of jobs. I've read some things whether it's true and I don't know, but one of the actions that happened this week was a big pipeline that was going to go across the country has been shut down or canceled. If the administration changes in 4 years, the next guy may or the next gal may start it up again. So it's up and down. It's like a roller coaster. Roller coasters are good only at Disney World or Carowinds. But for the thousands and thousands of folks who are working on that, all of a sudden they're unemployed. So if you're a statistic, if it's 6.7 is the nation's unemployment rate, but you're one of those, then it's not 6.7, it's 100%. And so there are sufferings, there are present sufferings, there are troubles, there are trials. There are all kinds of things. There's the isolation that's going on and the depression I mentioned a while ago. And the reality, friends, is that a lot of that stuff, some of that stuff anyway, was going on before the virus. There were people who were hurting and suffering. And perhaps you and I, as the church, did not do everything we ought to have done for those folk. But now it's worse. It's exacerbated because of the virus and the pandemic. Now, please don't mishear what I'm saying. I'm not saying not to pay attention. I'm not saying to not pay attention to the present sufferings and the troubles and the difficulties. In a sermon a few weeks ago, I made this statement I still stand by. There are 3 things we can do to cope, to live, to survive, to go on, to improve. Number 1, pay attention. Number 2, do what you can. And number 3, leave the rest to God. What I am saying is this, and it's found in these 4 passages, these 4 verses I want to share with you out of Romans chapter 8. Now think back to verse 18. I consider that our present sufferings, okay, he's saying that we're having them. And you know that for sure in your life. But in verse 35, Paul writes this. And we could add this to that, verse 35, that in these present sufferings, who shall separate us from the love of Christ? Shall trouble, you got any of those? Or hardship, are things easier than they once were or harder? Or persecution, are you being persecuted? I guess that depends on our definition. For most of us in this country, it hadn't cost us anything to be a follower of Christ. In other parts of the world, people are literally losing their heads because of their faith. You need to pay attention. Or famine. Well, most of us are probably not, at least in this part of our world, we're not suffering from famine. Doesn't it give you pause and you wonder sometimes when you go in some of the grocery stores and the shelves look so empty? Shall nakedness, or danger, or sword, violence, anger, animosity, hatred. Verse 36 says, as it is written, for your sake we face death all day long. We are considered as sheep to be slaughtered. And in verse 37 he gives the answer, no, in all these things we are more than conquerors through him who loved us. For I am convinced that neither death nor life, neither angels nor demons, and there's some of both of those. Scriptures tell us that many times we have entertained angels unaware because we didn't recognize them. If our concept and understanding of an angel is a cute little fellow or lady you see on a Christmas card with a little halo on his or her head, playing on a little harp, flying around, if that's what an angel is, we probably miss some angels in our midst. Maybe they look like that. Maybe there's something like that. The Bible refers sometimes to angels as really scary looking folks with a sword and a tongue of fire coming out of their mouth and guarding the Garden of Eden, for instance, back that early in the book. So neither angels nor demons, and you know there are demons around because of the way you see some folks act. Neither the present nor the future, nor any powers. I think here Paul was running out of things to compare, and he finally said, I'm just going to wrap it up and say anything. Any powers. Neither height nor depth nor anything else, there it is again, in all creation, will be able to separate us from the love of God that is in Christ Jesus our Lord. Do those verses say that there won't be trouble? Do those verses say there are no present sufferings? Do those verses say there won't be pandemics and shutdowns and anger and hatred and animosity? They do not say that. We would like for them to say that. We wish that were the way things were. We would like for things to be peaceful and calm and folk act like God has created us to act. But the reality is that in this world of the wages of sin and sin itself, there are folks who don't act right, and sometimes that's all of us. Because, my friends, of God's unchanging love, a love that doesn't depend on whether you've been good or bad, but a love without conditions. I think I may have mentioned to you one time that one day one of my children asked, could I ever do anything, this was long ago, could I ever do anything that would make you stop loving me? Now, I thought about that for a second before I answered. I do want to say that sometimes that's the best response to questions. Think just for a moment sometimes before we answer. My initial response was, well, what have you got in mind? And nothing. I finally realized that question meant, do you love me unconditionally? And of course, I do. And you do in yours. God does for all of us. So because of God's unconditional, unchanging love, we can have a deep, deep, deeper fellowship with Him no matter what comes our way. So my friends, stay awake. Pray for that deep relationship. Exercise it. Remember these verses. Nothing can separate us from God's love for us. Because no matter what, in Christ, whatever comes our way, the best is yet to be. I mentioned a little poem to you when I first started talking about the best is yet to come. I'll leave you with this thought. When we are walking with the Lord, the future is always bright. It matters not what comes our way when faith replaces sight. We live in such a finite world, we want to see before we can believe. But the scriptures tell us faith is the evidence of things not seen. And so, my friends, exercise your faith. Remember that when we walk with the Lord, He's holding our hand. And may it be so in your life and mine. We have what the hymn calls the blessed assurance. It is page 334. I simply ask you if you have that blessed assurance. If you don't, will you come and get it? If you do, will you rededicate yourself, wherever you are, to a renewal of that blessed assurance? And in once having done that, share that. Share that with folks around you. Help them, and in the process of helping them, you and I will be helping ourselves to overcome those fears and realize that yes, the best is to come. So we stand and as we sing, blessed assurance, Jesus is mine.